Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Law Alumni Weekend, virtually litigating CLE. Welcome to everyone that's joining us here in the building in Dineen Hall and everyone joining us at home. For folks joining us at home, if you do have questions that you want asked and answered, hopefully, please feel free to put those in the Q&A pod and we will get to those during the question time. But I would now like to welcome you all and thank our panelists and our moderator and thank Michael Kaplan, who's a partner at Lowenstein Sandler. And I'd also like to recognize that Lowenstein Sandler is our sponsor for this weekend, so thank you very much. And we have Judge DiAugustino, Allison Fett, and also Kara Kruger here joining us today. And all of our panelists, our ladies here at the end, are the class of 2011, along with Michael, who is also class of 2011, and they're celebrating their 10-year reunion this weekend. So congratulations and welcome to everybody here. And we're going to get started now. Michael?
Thank you, Kristen. Good morning, everyone here and everyone online. My name is Michael Kaplan. I'm a partner at Lowenstein Sandler and the host of today's CLE. The topic here arose out of a pretty remarkable event that happened on March 13th of 2020, which was that I was sent home from work and told not to come in the next day. And for some who know me, you may or may not find that remarkable. And certainly depending on the amount of Diet Coke or whoever my adversary of the day is, it's entirely possible that that was something that would have occurred in any event. But what made the event truly remarkable was the fact that everybody in the firm was sent home and told not to come to work the next day. And in fact, everyone in the entire legal profession probably was sent home. Some would call what happened in the last 18 months as transformative to this virtual setting. Some love it, some hate it. Today, we're going to discuss the pros and cons of the virtual versus non-virtual practice. And ultimately, when we're done, the question that we hope to be able to give you some thought about is are lawyers able to effectively advocate for their clients, whoever their clients may be, in that virtual environment? With that, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves, and then we will get started. Judge?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is May D'Agostino. I sit on the District Court of the Northern District of New York in Albany. You can clearly tell by looking at me that I am not the class of 2011. I graduated from Syracuse Law in 1980 and had a very, very positive experience here at the law school. I was mentored by Professor Travis Lewin. I was on the trial team. I actually met Michael when Michael was clerking for one of our other judges in the Northern District, Judge Gary Sharp. And after graduating from Syracuse Law, I went with a law firm in Albany that did primarily medical malpractice, but all types of defense work. So I spent most of my career defending physicians and hospitals and medical malpractice cases. However, I did a goodly amount of Section 1983 cases, products liability, and municipal work. I stayed with the Maynard O'Connor and Smith firm for many years, but in 1997, I created my own firm in Albany called D'Agostino, Cracker, Baines, and McGuire, where I continued to do medical malpractice defense, primarily brain damaged infant cases. In 2011, I went on the federal bench in Albany. And as Michael pointed out, we were told on or about March 16th that we had to close our chambers. We immediately outfitted our law clerks with laptops, but at another time I'll expound upon how that was working out and certain things that we had to change. But the court never closed. Our court clerk's office was always open. We put a drop box in the lobby for pro se litigants so that if they had to get something filed, they could just walk in the front door without traveling the building and getting it filed. And then there were a myriad of changes that are very dynamic. They change often, but in a few minutes, I can tell you more about that.
Thank you, Judge Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison Fute. I am a partner at Harris Beach Law Firm. I'm in the firm's Buffalo office. I graduated in 2011 from Syracuse. I also had a very positive experience at the law school. I was hired by Harris Beach through the on-campus interview process and started my career at a law school in the Rochester office. Spent about 4 years there and then moved to Buffalo. And I've been a commercial litigator right from the beginning. I handle some complex commercial cases as well as really just run the gamut, any other type of litigation matters that might need some assistance. I represent a lot of municipal clients, school districts, in administrative challenges in the court system. I practice both in the federal courts and in the state courts. I also have a pretty big plate of appellate work. So I've argued in the 3rd Department, 4th Department multiple times. I've argued at the 2nd Circuit. And Friday the 13th, March 13th, 2020, I was also one of the people sent home and told not to return. And honestly, have only been back physically in my office a handful of times since then. Our firm switched us somehow seamlessly to a remote work environment. We were up and running, I think, on the 17th, 18th of March. Everyone was remote for a period of time, except for our skeleton crew, who would come in every day to process the mail and scan it and send it to the recipients. And, you know, since then, it's been back and forth in terms of whether there are people in the office. I personally have decided to embrace the work from home environment. I'm completely paperless. I haven't printed a document in pretty much since March 13th, 2020. I don't have a printer at home, so I've learned how to be very productive in the electronic realm, virtual appearances. I can talk a little bit more about it, but I've argued both state and federal appeals virtually, and it's a mixed bag in terms of the benefits. I'm excited to be here to talk about both the benefits and the the cons with you today.
So, hi, everyone. My name is Kara Krieger. I am a senior counsel at National Grid. I focus on our New York regulatory group. By way of background, National Grid is an international gas and electric utility. We have gas and electric distribution in the UK as well as in the US, in New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, but not Rhode Island for very long. We actually just sold our Rhode Island business. So I graduated in 11 with Michael and Allison. Again, very positive experience. Loved my time here. Loved it so much that I actually met my husband here. We both work here. He works at a firm in town and I work at National Grid. So our experience was so positive, we never left. So at National Grid, I've been there. I started shortly after law school. I've been there for almost 10 years now. The entire time I've been in New York regulatory, which is an interesting experience because it's practiced before a regulatory agency. So all of the civil practice rules apply, but it's more of a quasi litigation setting. There's still hearings and other practice before a regulatory body, but it's not in court. I have handled a few of our matters that the appeals of a regulatory determination have gone to court. So I have done some practice in court as well, but it's a little bit different of a take than some of the traditional litigation practice. And I too was sent home in and around that time. My experience was a little different. I was on a commercial flight back from our office in Boston, and it was the day before we all got sent home, and I looked around and everyone was wearing masks. And it was just this surreal feeling of, I had never been in a situation where all of these people were wearing masks, and the next day everyone was sent home. So we've been able to transition fairly seamlessly. We have almost 15,000 employees in the US, both field and office based. So the office based employees have been remote since that time, which is a very surreal experience when you go down to the NYMO Art Deco building downtown, and there used to be 1,500 employees there, and now there's no one. But the field has remained in the field and serving our customers the whole time, which is a great accomplishment given a lot of the fear and other aspects that have come into play since the pandemic occurred. So happy to talk about that more as we go on in the presentation.
Great, so let's start with this, and I'll start with you, Tara, if you already know. How has your practice changed since the beginning of the pandemic?
So no one's in the office anymore, which is, it's a very strange thing because our practice, we work a lot with other groups, especially with respect to financial and customer data. So it was a very collaborative space. And if I had a question, I could just walk over to someone else's desk, tap them on the shoulder, we'd have a great dialogue, we'd get things done. Now I have to try to call people either on their cell phone or through Teams, and it's just, they have made strides through the technology and other means that were provided to make it more collaborative. But I think everyone's kind of on their own little island right now, which has made a lot of our regulatory filings, for example, a rate case is a document that resets, well, it's not a document, it's a proceeding that resets a utilities rates for a designated period of time. It is thousands and thousands of pages of documents that need to be collaborated and filed. We've filed 2 rate cases remotely. So it was a very different experience because that was a very paper intensive process. So now to have to do all of that online, you had to become very adept at editing and processing what you normally would print out and sit there and study over the computer. So that's changed, as well as all of our proceedings have now gone virtual, which has been a mixed bag. You go through the first 15 minutes where someone can't figure out how to go on mute, someone doesn't know how to work their camera, someone, so that's been difficult. I think people are definitely getting better about it, but it's also been something where I feel like in the virtual environment, people are more detached. They're willing to hide and go on mute and not say what they think, but then also they're willing to say things because they're not sitting directly in front of you. They might not necessarily say if you're in the room. So it's been a mixed bag. It's been a complete conversion to online, which I think was the way the world was kind of going anyways, but I think it was just a far quicker transition than any of us had imagined.
Judge Ellison, any thoughts on how, your practice has changed because you used to tell people to come to court at 10 a.m. and then you couldn't.
Well, yeah, the practice drastically changed for a while. The biggest problem for a federal court such as mine is that we could not have jury trials. And I'm a lawyer who used to have to explain to clients why it was taking so long to bring their case to fruition. And that was tough. So it has been very difficult, particularly on criminal cases where some defendants are incarcerated and not guilty of anything right now. They're incarcerated because they may have been deemed a danger to the community pre-trial. It's been very difficult. For a 1-year period, we could not have in-person civil trials, but mercifully in March of this year, when the COVID numbers in Albany County were going down and down, we consulted an infectious disease specialist, and we learned how to get jurors for our trials in person, socially distanced, with appropriate precautions. And interestingly, we sent out jury letters to a large group of people because we knew that some people would not want to come. And we said to them, you don't have to come if you don't want to. And maybe after sending out 150 questionnaires, 50 people or more opted out and said, we're not coming, we're afraid. But the people who came were almost celebratory in their desire to be there. It was if they could not take another moment in their home. Because during jury selection, I said, you don't have to be here. And they were saying, oh, we want to be here, we want to be here. So I've tried 7 cases to a conclusion in open court, civil and criminal, with jurors. The other thing that I just want to add is that, listen, I'm not a dinosaur, and I said to Michael on the phone when we were talking about this, I was grateful to be able to have remote proceedings and the ability to do things on Team and Skype or whatever platform we were using, because that was the only way we could inch justice toward the finish line. However, For law clerks, I take it as a solemn responsibility to teach law clerks about litigation. One of my law clerks comes into every trial that I have so that I can tell them the good, the bad, the indifferent. When they're sitting in their bedroom at home, I can't teach them. Young interns who have come through my office and landed jobs at great law firms are working in their bedroom of their parents' homes right now. They have no in-person mentoring. They have no one to keep them from getting discouraged. This is not optimal, in my view, what we are doing. And I'm fully back. My staff is all vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. We're back. So yes, grateful to have the technology to move the cases forward. But am I a proponent of practice? Would I be a proponent if I were a trial lawyer? No, because my clients wanted me sitting next to them in a deposition room. And certainly young lawyers are suffering. I don't care what anyone says. Young lawyers in their first few years at their law firm, it's just not a good situation. My personal view, I don't speak for anybody else.
Yeah, and one would think, having put the panel together, I would have intentionally slanted it in a way that shifted with my view, which is entirely in line with Judge D'Agostino's. But I also know there's another perspective. And Allison, you're in a large law firm like I am. How has the practice changed there in this virtual environment? Whereas before, we could walk down the hallway and find junior associates to do, just about anything. And now you have to do the Zoom thing or whatever, or call them or track them down, or
Yeah.
how's it changed?
So I count myself lucky in that I was far enough in my career that I am not one of the younger attorneys at the firm who's missing out on the collaboration, which is in the practice of litigation is essential. You're going to be working with colleagues to put together a huge motion or prepare for a trial. It is very difficult to do those things, when everyone is on an island. But in some regards, I know for younger, and also the younger attorneys that have small children, when their kids were home from school for, March, April, May of 2020, that was something else. My children actually got pregnant during the pandemic and had my second baby a few months ago, but my son was 2. His birthday was on April 5th. So he was very young. I was lucky enough that his daycare stayed open. My husband's a federal employee, so he was considered essential. We were clearly going to take advantage of the fact that we could continue to send him. But my colleagues, they're still suffering from the impact of that. It was so hard for them to juggle having small children at home and continue to do their job. And a lot of them ultimately had to take leave because it was just not feasible. The people who were able to make it through that, I have so much respect for them. I think it wasn't talked about enough how difficult that was for people. And even if you have a parent that's another parent that could work from home, you're still splitting your day taking care of the kids. My son was quarantined at least 5 times. So he was home for a period, at least 50 days or so throughout the course of the pandemic. And it was exhausting. I don't know how people were surviving. What ended up happening was it became completely normal to hear kids screaming in the background of a potentially important call. And I think everybody, including clients, the courts, everybody was very accommodating and understanding through that period, which was critical. I know there was one judge who would just get in his car so that he could hold conferences because it was the only place that he could have some quiet. And, it was difficult. And the biggest change, I think, which was an advantage, was that in state court, there was still a fair amount of cases that were not e-filed cases. And those cases were always I hated having to do filings in those cases because I knew it was going to be a crunch to try to get everything ready and out the door in advance and serve everyone with paper copies. So the New York State system did set up a procedure where you could easily convert your paper filed cases into e-filing, and that made a huge difference because once everything was up and running again and we could start commencing actions, that we wouldn't have been able to do it. We wouldn't have been able to continue working on those cases if we didn't have that opportunity. One thing that's in some ways a benefit in terms of dealing and being able to talk to younger associates. My firm is multiple offices across New York State. I very rarely work with people in Buffalo, so I typically was working remotely, collaboratively with individuals within my firm forever. That's just the nature of my practice. And instead of doing audio calls, which was the norm, pick up your phone and call someone, it's now the norm that you're scheduling a video conference. So I'm seeing people more often now than I was pre-COVID, because we are making that effort to have the video calls. And for the younger associates, it's fully recognized that this is a problem and that we need to be proactive in making sure to bring them into the fold. And the way that we've sort of been able to do that is to have set times where people are in the office. And so you're getting some FaceTime with people to the extent the COVID restrictions permit at any given time. And essentially having people on speed dial on your cell phone. I don't really call people on their office phone anymore. I'm calling them on their cell phone. So that's probably bad in some people's view, because it makes you're also giving your cell phone out to your clients, which I didn't used to do previously. So now I'm always reachable, which has its downfalls, but it makes me approachable to the younger associates. They feel more comfortable just reaching out to me quickly to ask me a question that way, which so I think we were working through it.
I've discovered the Zoom instant call feature, which I'm sure any of my associates who are watching this hate, but it's a great feature. It's just like walking by their office. It's terrific. But Judge, a question for you is Allison and I work at firms, and Kara works in the private sector. The resources and the speed in which things happen in our world may be just slightly faster than the federal government in some respects. So was the technology in place for you already, or what had to happen for you to be able to continue, as you said, to inch justice forward? I know you touched on it briefly, but it'd be great to hear in your setting what happened there.
And I'm going to answer that. I just want to say one thing in response to what you just heard, and that is, I'm not so sure anyone has really measured the impact that staying home had on young parents. When you think about it, many people quickly say how great, you can be home with your kids. I'm talking your non-school age kids and kids in elementary school, because yes, I had lawyers in their cars for proceedings, same reason. And when I first saw it, I thought this is a little sketchy, but they said, Judge, this, I had a toddler at one time, and I cannot imagine being expected to bill 200 hours a week with my toddler back then. So the quick thing is, it's great to be home with our kids. This is really wonderful. We're having quality time. But I was seeing a lot of things filed at midnight. I was seeing a lot of letters coming in at 10 o'clock at night. When you have an office to go to, you at least know from 9 to 5, you're there, you're away from your kids. But then when you get home, you can be with your kids. So it took a toll on, I believe, a lot of parents, many women and some men, but a lot of women. It just did. As far as how quickly did we transition, I'll tell you, Michael, we have amazing IT experts in our courthouses. And once we realized on March 16th that we had to transition, immediately we were all of the judges have laptops and iPads anyway. And for anyone who did not know how to utilize Skype or Zoom, or eventually what we settled on, Teams, There was quick, rapid training for anyone who couldn't do it. And I think that we went into it rather seamlessly. My son is grown, and so after a couple weeks home and the refrigerator beckoning too much and oh, maybe I'll do a load of laundry, I came back to my office. I was by myself, but many of our law clerks called IT and said, we can't work with this one screen. We need another monitor. My courtroom deputy, I need a scanner at home. I need, other things. And fortunately, procurement was quickly able to get what the law clerks needed and what the courtroom deputies needed. So I do think as a court, we really did not have any downtime. We always conference things by phone to save time. I don't require lawyers from New Jersey and Pennsylvania to come into my office for a pretrial conference. So, the template was there. And the big problem was hearings that we had to have where some smaller law firms did not have the technology. What would be a one-day hearing turned out to be a 3-day hearing. Lawyers, in my view, weren't getting together to talk about how they were going to display evidence. What witness in one law firm had what evidence, what documents, what witness had other documents. Some lawyers could not show the documents on the screen. So it became very time consuming. Yes, large law firms with great capabilities, they knew what to do, but the smaller and the mid-sized law firms, they were really struggling.
Kara, how about for you? What had to be deployed, if anything?
Well, we were already somewhat of a hybrid working environment. So if you ever needed to, you had the ability to work from home. Every employee has their own laptop. At that point, we had VPN, but now we've transitioned to some other different system where anything I need to do in the office, I can do at home just by turning on my laptop, which was great. But there was also, being in the legal profession, I think we're all inclined to have paper copies of a lot of things just for our own sanity. So it was hard. There were things in the office that I needed that I now had to reference. Like I had all my tabs and my highlighting, my very law school approach to my profession. And so it was retraining myself to say, okay, I just have to look at this screen. But thankfully I was able to, my boss came in and said, okay, everyone's going to work from home. As long as you log what you've taken from your desk, take it home. So I had immediately 2 monitors, a wireless keyboard, wireless mouse, charging station. I had everything that I needed, but I know not everyone had that opportunity. So I think as we're progressing, and now we've actually changed our model, we are going to be more of a hybrid workplace throughout the entire company. So some days in the office, some days at home. I think we're figuring out, and I'm part of the transition team of what do you need to be productive at the office and what do you need to be productive at home, because you really want to maximize what your employees can do in both forums. So for me, I literally remember, so I was on the plane the day before, saw the masks, started watching the news a little more because I was very curious as to what was going on. And then the next day we were told to go home. I got a cart from our utility closet, had my coworkers help me load my monitors, everything, pulled my car up, put everything, and I have not taken anything back since then. So I was fortunate that I had a very understanding work environment, but as the judge was saying, it's those smaller and other law firms that might not necessarily have those resources, they really struggled. So I was very grateful. My husband, because I brought all of my equipment home with me, he actually had to work out of our bedroom for a while our daughter was home. So he didn't have the same luxuries that I did, but because I was able to do that, I was well equipped from day one to just work from home. So not a lot has changed with respect to my capabilities, at least.
Allison, what did the firm do for you all? Was it similar to Lowenstein, where we just gave everyone a link to Best Buy or Amazon and said, buy what you need to keep working and go from there? And the only thing I bought was a shredder because I am a paper person, and what did you guys do?
So our firm actually had already started this technology rollout initiative, and we were in our 3rd year of it. where each attorney was able to choose whether they wanted an iPad or a laptop. And that would be their, their work device. And pretty much all the attorneys had one or the other, or, I mean, for me, I just had my Mac and then I had the iPad that I had taken from the firm. The real issue was getting the support staff up and going. And I think attorneys, for the most part, had figured out a way to work from home on the weekends or days. A lot of people log back in at night. So they had some infrastructure already in place. And I had just actually bought a massive monitor and thinking like, with small kids, I really need to figure out a way to make this work at home so that I can get more done. But with the staff, I'm blanking right now, but I'm pretty sure that before everything shut down, our firm saw this, they kind of saw it coming and they mass ordered laptops. So somehow we might have been one of like the last companies that was able to get a large order. And we had, our IT went from office to office and set up the actual laptop so people, the person would come in, get it, and then go home. And, yes, having only one monitor thing is a huge issue. A lot of people were given a second monitor. It's just, I'm sorry, but you cannot work with only one monitor.
Agree.
Or unless you have a big screen, because you just need to have, if you're not gonna have paper, you need to have multiple documents on your screen at once, or it's just going to be extremely difficult. So I think that for me, I converted my walk-in closet to an office because we don't have an office at home. And it took me forever to realize I just needed to buy a backdrop because I'd be logging in and, it's either Zoom, Skype, Teams, or WebEx. And each time you're doing it, it's a different interface. So you're not sure, oh God, am I going to be able to have one of the virtual backdrops on this call? And there was times where my dirty laundry was clearly behind me, and I'm like, I take my iPad and like slowly walk down the stairs to try to get away from it. But I bought this backdrop on Amazon. It was like $15, and it's these Victorian windows. And and people keep asking me, they're like, "Where are you? You have such a nice house." I'm like, "Yeah, just go on Amazon. I'll send you the link." But it made such a difference. Once I had figured that out, and I was able to with ease just hop on a call without having to figure out the logistics of it. That was very important.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do always enjoy trying to figure out if someone's background is virtual or real, and I have to tell you, what I've seen with technology is it's gotten really difficult to figure it out. I mean, sometimes it's pretty obvious, but sometimes I have to tell you, if you see me staring at the screen during calls, it's not because I'm actively paying attention, it's because I'm trying to figure out if the person's background is real or not, which may be good. But anyway, I digress. So this question, let's start with you on Allison, which is, and then I'd like to hear from everyone, is what gets lost in the virtual environment that really can't be replicated?
Yeah, so I'd say in the two instances where I'm with third parties, not just colleagues, it'd be at depositions and on court conferences or court proceedings. And in those circumstances, you immediately lose out on the small talk, the informal conversations that happen with the court reporter before a proceeding starts or before the deposition starts. Creating the rapport or setting the mood in a deposition, you can't do that virtually. And one of the other things about depositions is it's in the one sense, it's great because I think going forward, you're not going to be traveling for unimportant depositions that are in distant or remote locations. It's just not necessary. And clients are going to be able to participate, not actively, but they'll be able to be there for depositions, whether it be with you in the room or virtually. And that's something that, that's an advantage for clients, and you're reducing your clients' costs by saving on the travel. But during those depositions, the other thing besides just that small talk that gets lost is the flow of it.
it can really be very choppy because you're not sure when somebody is done talking as much when it's virtual. One of my first virtual proceedings happens to be an oral argument at the Second Circuit on April 1st of last year. And I was one of the first arguments that they were doing remotely, and they were at that point just audio. There was no visual. That was so brutal because I couldn't see the judges. I had no idea if they were listening. And because it was early on and they weren't really sure how to do it, the panel didn't ask questions during the argument because they didn't want to cut me off. But then they didn't ask any questions at the end either. And so what happened was, as you're preparing for an oral argument, you're kind of imagining, okay, they're going to ask me this question, and this is how I'm going to weave in that answer. That's how I'm going to get it before the court. And, you have it might not be in your main script, right? But when they're not asking questions and you're not having that back and forth, you might not have that opportunity. And that was difficult, for sure. And the one thing that's interesting about depositions is you can really set your client up or the deponent to look a certain way on camera that you can't really do in person. So there's, if you're deposing an expert, you'll see their, nice little certificates and awards behind them on the wall. We have a classmate, she was telling me that she was deposing someone who had an Emmy, and the Emmy was on the back in the backdrop, trying to really set the stage. One time it was, they're trying to make a plaintiff look more sympathetic, so they made the plaintiff look younger by having a stuffed animal in the background, who's in his bedroom. And that can actually have an effect on people in terms of their willingness to go hard on someone if you're making them look more sympathetic. And another dynamic at depositions is because the client is there and watching, and there's all these faces on the screen, that can be very intimidating for a witness in a manner that you wouldn't get in person. And that they will be potentially less forthcoming because they don't want to say it to their adversary's face, because it's probably maybe your former business partner who, even though you're litigating against each other, maybe you still do have some respect for, and that can make the difference between getting the real information out of a witness.
Judge, what gets lost for you? I know that Judge Sharp used to always tell me the toughest thing he ever had to do was the easiest thing and toughest thing was make credibility determinations. And he told me that you'll know the truth when you see it. But how do you see it?
Well, that is the most difficult thing, to judge credibility in a remote proceeding. And that comes from my experience as a judge and also as a trial lawyer who often tried between 8 and 10 cases a year for 30 years. I grew up in the golden age of litigation when cases were actually being tried. And I love trial lawyers and I respect them, but I have also seen a number of nefarious things over the years myself. And so I believe that depositions I wasn't a commercial lawyer, I was a personal injury lawyer. Depositions in personal injury field are much better done in person, so you can see what is there to be seen. I worry about whether people have cell phones in their lap and are getting messages during the deposition. I deposed experts who had cheat sheets in their pockets, and I could discern that as a trial lawyer just by watching this for a couple hours. Human nature. I'm like, doctor, do you have something in your pocket? You can't get that on a video deposition. Virtually impossible to judge credibility. And what I'm seeing now is that for trials, I'm getting, I let all my lawyers know my trials are in person, and that's driven statistically by what the COVID numbers are and my infectious disease consultant. But I'm getting, Judge, can so-and-so appear virtually? And my answer right now is no. I have a jury here. I'm here. your witness needs to be here. So, look, I know it's here to stay. I'm not naive. I know virtual proceedings are here to stay. I know that they can arguably save time and money. My courtroom deputy spends now a ton of time trying to set up virtual proceedings. And in the private sector, your support staff are probably doing the same thing. So, yeah, it can save time and money, but it also takes a lot to set all this stuff up. So Judge Sharp is right. There's nothing like eyeing somebody, to try to judge credibility. And that even comes through with the masks, because I've been asking jurors, do you feel you can judge credibility with someone wearing a mask? Because for our trials right now, everyone's wearing a mask. But at least you can see the eyes. And if a witness doesn't want to wear a mask, we give them a clear shield. So yeah, it's very hard to judge credibility. I don't care what anyone says, the depositions take longer than they used to. And when I've held hearings, they've taken way longer than they used to take. Lots of recesses. Judge, can we have a few minutes? We need to email over some documents. So what used to take a day is taking 2 days.
All right, so let me ask this question, and we'll start with Tara, which is what is one thing that you would like to stay that has evolved in the virtual environment here, and what is the thing you most want to see leave us?
Yeah, I think with respect to what I want to stay, I think it's less of a technological feature, but more of just a general approach and understanding. Everyone seems to be a little more flexible now that we're in this virtual environment, as Allison noted. I mean, my daughter during one settlement conference came in and screamed at me about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and everyone kind of laughed and we took a recess. And I think it's acknowledging that lawyers, clients, businesses, we all have personal things that we deal with, and the flexibility and the understanding that has kind of just been pervasive throughout this whole process has been really great. It's been challenging at times, but I think it's a mindset, right? We're no longer attorneys who are trying to get X amount of billable hours. You're there from 9 a.m. until, heaven knows when. You've got this life outside of work, and that balance is more achievable. What I would like to get rid of.
I mean, it could just be kicking your husband out of the bedroom doing work.
Oh, no, he's been backing me out. That's been great. Yeah. So that was a 3-month stint, and I'm pretty sure his posture has suffered for it. But I think we need to eventually get back into some combination of not everything can be virtual. I think we're going to get back there, but I think too often people are now scheduling meetings virtually that one probably doesn't need to be a meeting. It could be an email or something like that, right? But
First of all.
yeah, people have lost that connection, but they're over scheduling virtual meetings. And I think when we get back into the office, people are going to continue to somewhat hide behind their laptop. And I think you lose that connection, the credibility, the control. And so I think we need to come back to some system that has some combination of in-person meetings and virtual.
What do you think, Allison? One thing you like, one thing you hate?
One thing I like is the flexibility and the benefits to working parents, I think is the most important. Just for me, not having to get myself ready when I'm getting my kids ready and out the door in the morning gives me more time to sleep and gives me the ability to fill another hour in my day that I didn't get previously. And I'm a little antisocial sometimes by nature, and I think the lack of interruptions that I get at home is a huge benefit to me and my ability to stay focused, because let's face it, a lot of the interruptions at work are not work related.
Chit chat.
It's chit chat, it's stopping by, but that's also what I miss, because
Yeah.
those are the things that make you feel like you're part of a community, part of a team, and you know those people and you trust them, and that's how you build your relationships with your coworkers. So it's really a double-edged sword, and I do think we're gonna have to go back to some balance. And I just know that for my firm, we're not there yet. And we're very virtual right now. And I'm really hoping that people, once, I keep saying this, but once it dies down and then the question is it ever gonna die down? And I don't know, it's hard because the finish line isn't in sight yet here. And so it's hard to know what the end result and the end combination of things are gonna be for all different areas of.
Judge, I'm gonna answer the question in 1 second, but for those attending virtually, my little script here says I'm supposed to read to you a CLE code right now, which is orange 44. I'm not going to spell that for you, but the CLE code is orange 44. If you can't spell it, you will not earn the CLE. Judge, one thing you like, one thing you can't wait to see hit the road.
Well, I've always liked moving cases by teleconference or, I'm certainly happy to, get people on a Teams meeting to talk about the progression of the case. Again, that's nothing new. We've always done that to try to make the daily life of the attorneys a little bit easier. I was a single parent, and if my son was not in school and I was expected to be working at home, I could not have done it. I just could not have done it. In our area, people were trying to hire tutors, they were trying to hire babysitters, but because of COVID, people weren't going to other people's homes. There was nothing that I could have done to be efficient with a 3 or 4 year old in my house when I was a single parent. So it would have been very tough. And plus I was, when I started my own law firm, we only had 12 lawyers and we lived by the billable hour. That's just the way it is. You're at a 12 or 14 person law firm in a small market, you eat what you kill. And I'm just saying, I could not, if this had happened to me when I was 33, I could not have done it. So I do like anything that keeps a case moving. If it's a remote deposition, if it has to be, I guess it has to be. I mean, we always videotape depositions from time immemorial. If anyone ever tells me that I have to have a remote trial, I'm done. I'm resigning.
All right, let's take, I want to ask Rich real quick, are there questions online in the chat? No questions. Okay, good. All right, so let's go to then the seminal question to ask, which is, and I'll start with you, Allison, and we've got about 10 minutes left here. Hopefully we get a question, but is it, in your view, can lawyers effectively advocate for their clients in the virtual environment?
Not when the court is involved. If you're at a court proceeding, it is next to impossible to walk away from a virtual court proceeding and feel like you communicated your point effectively, because you miss all of the cues, psychological, behavioral cues. You are just the distance and not having any communication with anyone outside of your actual argument in that experience is just, it's bizarre, and I don't like it. But I think that in other contexts of litigation, yes, I think that you can effectively conduct a deposition, and you can effectively have collaborative efforts with your colleagues virtually to come up with the same work product that you were producing if you were all in the office. I think that is, I'm comfortable with that, and I don't feel as though the actual quality of work is impacted by the virtual setting.
Tara, how about you? You have the unique experience of having both internal and external facing client things. So in your view, are you able to effectively advocate for those clients in the virtual environment?
I think, as Allison noted, it's kind of a mixed bag. It depends on what you're trying to advocate for. That said, I will say, I think there's going to be a stronger emphasis on written communication. So your papers need to be stronger, your emails need to be more concise, to the point, and persuasive, because you might not always have that opportunity to sit directly across. For example, if I were to go to a board meeting and I need to present on a legal issue to our board, it's much different in person than it is virtually. So now being able to write supporting board papers and other items that they're gonna review, I need to have an even more focused lens on what I want to present and what I want them to get out of it, so that I am effectively communicating risk and other points that I want to get across. So I think it depends on the setting. I think we are somewhat handicapped in a way in that sense. It's not as easy, effective, and streamlined as it used to be, but I think as we progress through this, it's now been almost 2 years, right? We're learning and we're getting better at this. So hopefully, like I said, we'll go back to some hybrid of in-person and virtual, but along the way, we'll get better as we educate.
And I meant to ask, I'm sorry, before I turn the floor to the judge, does anyone in the room have any questions you'd like to answer? Just ask. Go ahead, sir.
I am Rich Levy, class of 1977. I practice bankruptcy law in New York, and I deal with federal courts most of the time, so this may actually go to the judge first. It seems natural that even in the pandemic, the rules of procedure are the rules of procedure, and we're supposed to follow it. There's actually an interesting published decision in the bankruptcy area from about a year ago of a judge who encountered a situation where a lawyer said, well, there was COVID, I missed the date because of COVID. I didn't know that the court was going to hold me to the letter of the rules. Have any of you encountered that situation either as an advocate facing it or as a judge presiding over the case? And how do you deal with it?
Well, whenever anyone says bankruptcy, I usually get hives because I do get bankruptcy appeals, but what you just said, sir, has been very, very common over the past several months. Whenever I've tried to schedule anything, I can't because of COVID. We, as a judge, you have to be very careful because you don't know the personal circumstances of the individual, whether they have autoimmune issues or whatever. But I've heard a lot of I can't. And what I have to do is, as humanely as I can, I have had to say to lawyers, I had two lawyers, I'm worried about the damn clients who are looking for their day in court. So I had like a 4.5-year-old case, and one lawyer said, well, my cousin 3 times removed, I was around him and I said, look, I have an infectious disease specialist who says I can start this case on April 18th. I can do it safely. I am going to do it, but I have had a lot of that. In some situations, attorneys have sent to my courtroom deputy private letters where they have outlined an excellent reason why they should not have to try a case under COVID conditions. And if I get one of those letters, it's like case adjourned. But many attorneys have used the COVID pandemic as an excuse to try to be late with their papers, to try to continuously adjourn depositions. And I won't have any part of that. Justice has to move.
No, I agree, and also, Rich, I also have spent some time in the bankruptcy court in the Southern District of New York, and I can tell you that the court call is not my friend. I much prefer the in-person, but I guess at least on the court call technology they have, at least you can see who's talking, or in the most cases, see who's supposed to be on mute and is not, because the online portal highlights it for you and shows you who's talking. But Judge, I want to ask you to just take the question, and in the last few minutes we have, the floor is yours on it. Is you have been practicing law longer than us, not much longer because you're not a member of the class of 2011
Right.
now.
Thank you.
But can lawyers effectively advocate in the virtual environment?
Yes, they can. I know I've been a naysayer here, but I've had many attorneys on remote hearings advocate very strongly. I didn't even mention the dilemma that we've had with the criminal cases over the last year, because criminal defendants have a right to be sentenced in person and a right to have their plea colloquies in person, but we did get dispensation through the CARES Act in certain circumstances to do these things remotely. So I've had public defenders and US attorneys and even attorneys in civil cases admirably advocate remotely. And I give them a lot of credit for doing that. Is it the ideal way to do it? Probably not, but yes, Michael, people have really worked, most lawyers have worked hard and have done their advocating as well as they possibly can remotely. And I've said that to them during the proceeding. You know, I credit you, you've been well prepared. This has moved, you know, at an appropriate pace. There have been exceptions to that. One hearing, one law firm had 4 computers in the room and they were all echoing off each other. And it's like, so it took a long time, but yes, lawyers have done a very nice job when they were dealt this blow, when they were told to leave their office, like all of you were. I can't complain about what lawyers have done to adapt to the situation.
Fritz, we do have a question.
This is from Lauren Valenzuela, class of 11, one of your classmates. She says, "Hi, great to see you guys. Question is, any tips for litigating in the virtual environment that you have found work well for you?"
All right, so we have about 2 minutes and Allison, you want to give Lauren the 2-minute version of your tip?
Sure, I mean, I'll plug again, get that backdrop.
Yeah.
This is not sponsored by Amazon.
Just make yourself comfortable. If you feel like you're having a problem technology wise, put it on the top of your to-do list to get it addressed. If your mouse isn't comfortable on your hand, order a new one, get a new one as fast as you can, because it's the cumulative impact of those small inconveniences that will make you unproductive in the work from home environment. And get a system down for any type of virtual proceeding and have it sort of just ready to go. It does take a lot longer to prepare for things. Sometimes I think it takes me much longer to prepare my virtual setup for an argument than it would just to drive down to the courthouse and back. And so you got to really just have your toolkit ready to go and really just build on it. I mean, every week that goes by, I feel like I become more and more efficient. It's a work in progress.
Give yourself more time for hearing to go, deposition to go. Just give yourself more time. With that, we are at the hour mark, and I know that we have a schedule to keep, because otherwise we're just going to turn the Zoom feed off on us. So first, I want to thank the panelists for coming and presenting. I thought it was great, very great. Syracuse University College of Law for allowing us to put this on, and for those who are not here at the alumni weekend,
Come back next year.
there's still events later today.
Come next year.
And if not, tune in.
Come next year.
Yes, come next year. Thank you all.